Good morning, grade 12s. Is it still the morning? It is not. Good afternoon, grade 12s. 12:14 p.m. Off to a good start on this video. This, I think, will be the last 1984 criticisms video. And so I'll give you a few days with this, and then we will move on to talk about thesis statements. And you are going to come up with your own thesis statement. I will help you with that. But you're going to come up with your own thesis statement for sure, and put together an essay outline. I don't think actually writing the essay is going to be helpful at this point. If anybody would like to go ahead and write a full essay, they are more than welcome to do that. I will read it and I will evaluate the heck out of that thing. But I don't think I'll have to. Anyway, okay, so we talked about microcosm last time. I mentioned how microcosm is like the go-to analysis for 1984, simply because it's so uncanny how well Orwell presaged the sort of climate we live in today, 80 odd years after the book was published, 70 odd years. So that is definitely a very popular one, but not to say that it's the only one that applies. So let's get rolling with today's. We're looking at feminist criticism. We obviously only have really, there are other sort of auxiliary characters that are women, but the main female character in the book is Julia. And so just to quickly recap the feminist, if you're using feminine criticism, these are the things you look for. So we've got the covert feminist agenda here, where my pointer is. I don't seem to have one. You have the covert feminist agenda. I can't seem to make my pointer work, my cursor. You have stereotypes of women. Sorry, covert feminist agenda is when a female character is secretly unhappy about her station in life. She secretly wants to do other things. So her agenda is secret. It's covert. That's what that means. We have stereotypes, which is the classic, homemaker for a female, the sort of the role that everyone assumes that females play. Phallocentrism, third on that list, is the males being the center of everything. Patriarchy is the situation where male characters treat their female counterparts like they are children. So, pats on the head, you're so silly, and kind of don't pay attention to them. That's patriarchy. Imprisonment and or isolation is fairly straightforward. Silencing, again, is the removal of the voice from the female characters. They're not allowed to speak their mind. They're not allowed to contribute to the discussion. And repression is the last one, where female characters, kind of bottle up their feelings until they can burst out at the worst possible time. So those are your feminist look-fors with respect to Julia. Okay, so the interesting thing in 1984 is it doesn't exactly present a very biased environment in terms of the sexes that I can think of off the top of my head. Julia and Winston both work in the party, so there's maybe there's more men that work there than women. There's more male characters for sure than there are females, so perhaps there's an imbalance there. But otherwise, the society in 1984 is very, very punitive and under you're under high surveillance. But it doesn't seem to, and again, it's been a while since I read the book. It doesn't seem that there's a lot of outward sort of gender discrimination. But nonetheless, is there a message here about traditional gender roles? You can kind of combine this with historical criticism. You can look up the role of women in society in Orwell's time when he was writing the book, which would be interesting because it was a long time ago, and females' roles in society would be not the same as now. However, it was also wartime, and wartime pressed a lot of women into the workforce because men were off fighting the war. So there might be a little bit of an interesting dynamic there if you looked into it. Anyway, what assumptions are made about females or males based on what characters? Are there any patterns? Does what's depicted in the book help you analyze or synthesize or recognize any patterns or stereotypes in our North American sort of gender landscape, if you will? And then, if so, what do those stereotypes or patterns say about our culture in general? Okay, so that would be Feminist Analysis of 1984. And if we were in class, you could have made a Tinder or something for Julia, but we'll just burl on past that to this cat here, Karl Marx, Marxism. Now, there's a lot of preamble here before we actually get to the, applying the criticism. So I'll go fairly quickly through that. You can pause if you need. But just as a refresher, the main components, Marxism has to do with economics. And he felt economic structure is the main driving force behind all social conditions and historical changes. So, what people are doing for work, how long they're doing it, what their conditions are, who's getting rich, who's being taken advantage of. Marx felt that was central to humanity, essentially. Capitalism, as our system now, is based on exploitation of laborers. So again, if you use the example of a factory in somewhere where it's very cheap to have a factory, like Bangladesh or India or China, where those places don't have the same kind of labor laws that we do here. If Nike were to move its factory or if Apple were to move its factories from China to the U.S., those goods, it would be far more expensive for those companies to produce those goods, and they would pass those costs right down the line to us, the consumers. So again, Marxism is based on that sort of idea of exploitation of labor. Nike and Apple have factories where they do because that is the cheapest place for them to have those factories. Okay, so the aim of Marxism is to bring about a classless society based on the common ownership of the means of production, distribution, exchange. The last bit of that isn't super important, but the classless society is for 1984. I think Orwell has portrayed or tried to portray, as classless society as possible. There are three distinct classes, and he talks about that at length. We've got the proles, the outer party, and the inner party, but that is still a fairly classless society when you sort of compare to today. Okay, that's a cool quotation there. Mr. Pepper came in one time and interrupted me with that and pretended like I didn't know what it meant. But I'll let you read that on your own. Actually, I'll read it. Good start. If the product of labor is alienation, production itself must be active alienation. The alienation of the object of labor merely summarizes the alienation in the work activity itself. This is the relationship of the worker to his own activity as something alien, not belonging to him. Activity as suffering, passivity, strength as powerlessness, creation as emasculation, the personal, physical, and mental energy of the worker, his personal life, as an activity which is directed against himself, independent of him and not belonging to him. Okay, so that's a really long-winded and sort of precise way of saying that capitalism completely divorces the worker from what he or she is producing. And Elwell and Karl Marx felt that was bad. Okay, Marxism look for us here's what you need to look for in 1984 if you are doing some Marxist criticism. A controlling class which dictates art, religion, law, or ideas. That should be ringing some major league bells. The working class getting more and more alienated from culture, power, and their own work. I think Winston, there's a very strong resemblance of that in the book with Winston, how he gets fairly alienated from his own work, and he starts to feel resentment about that. And then a literal or symbolic revolution by the working class, and good old Winston and Julia gave it the college try, even though it doesn't, his revolution is short and sweet and small, but he still tried. Okay, so part of the message of 1984, part of Orwell's message, I think, is the futility of a revolution against a state like the one depicted in the book. So perhaps Winston's sort of pathetic attempt at revolution, has a greater point within the novel. Okay, we are also looking for overt meaning, so clear discussions of work, money, and class, which don't really happen too much. Winston talks about the proles. I guess it kind of does. He talks about the proles and how they're oblivious and kind of envies their obliviousness. And he talks about the privileges that the inner party has and stuff. So there is a little bit of discussion about money and class. Characters suffering from oppression. The proles are, absolutely, but they don't know it. So again, there's some nuance in there. Covert meaning, sort of hidden, just basically the same kind of things, but just hidden, not explicitly discussed. So that's what you're looking for if you want to apply some Marxist criticism to 1984. Okay, that's what we would have done if we were in class. Oh, sorry, biblical. Let's tack this one on. I have no idea what time I'm at here, but that's fine. Biblical. Ooh, if you think you can, you go nuts. If you're knowledgeable about the Bible, which I believe previously expressed that I am not. You may be able to find some good stuff in 1984 having to do with biblical allusions or references. Not sure. Okay, so that is the end of the slideshow. There we go. Please ask me any questions you have. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm going to give you a few days with this last chunk of the slideshow before we start talking about thesis statements, and that's what we're gonna talk about next is how to create a thesis statement. So anyway, enjoy, and I will talk to you on Slack, and I will be in touch soon.